Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Faith Unaltered presentation. I'm your host, David Russell, and I am here with my legendary co-host, the man with the voice, Tyler Fowler. What's going on, brother?
Oh, not much, man. Just hanging out. Had a good day at work and now ready to do some fellowship and talk some exploring the foundations of reality. Like, I'm excited. It's gonna be
Dude,
nice.
I am too, man. I'm ready for my mind to be blown, man. These guys are awesome. You know, if you don't know Travis Worth, like you haven't been watching
You
the show.
should.
You haven't been subscribed to this channel but for like a day, So like, yeah, Travis was my old co-host, and yeah, he's with RTB. I don't know what AC means right now. What does AC mean, Travis?
It's their apologetics community. So reasons
Okay.
to believe they have like an apologetics community, a scholar community, and then the staff, visiting scholars. It's kind of categorized like that.
Nice.
Right on. Well,
In other words, I don't have my PhD yet.
well, you got your PhD in my heart.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
You're a
at my
scholar, sir.
master's. I'm almost
You're a
at my
scholar.
master's. So.
I am too, bro. I only got like 5 classes left, and I'm
That's
on my
great.
thesis.
That's
It's
awesome.
so cool, man. And I'm ready. I'm ready to take a little break, but not too long because I want to jump right
Sure.
into my PhD. But I'm really excited to have Christopoulos here, and he's from Exploring Reality. I love his work. He was on Poro with us for the Problem of Evil show. He didn't say much because he was listening, but
Yeah. I do that
bro,
a lot.
That's
bro,
good.
it's awesome
That's
to
a
have
good way
you.
to learn. Yeah.
And I've been following you for a while. I follow you on TikTok, and I follow you on wherever I can find you. I've heard a lot with you, so I am just excited to have you here to talk about this topic, because this topic is so cool. Like, we've been all over the place. I mean, we've talked Genesis and the flood. We're about to start talking Jewish objections to Jesus. We're hitting even ghosts and aliens. We even did
Determinism,
yes,
indeterminism.
yes, we've hit all over the place. And you know what? I thought it was like, okay, let's get a philosophical show. Let's get let's dive into theism. Let's dive into the foundations of reality. And I got a hold of Travis. He's like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, you know what? I think you and Than would both go really good together on this. So, Than, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, since you're the special guest right now? Travis is just a guest because he's been on the show so many times.
I'm not
Yeah.
special. I'm
special.
very humbled and blessed to be here. I really appreciate you guys having me here. So,
It's our honor, brother.
Yeah.
my name's Than Christopoulos. I've been a Christian for about 6.5 years now. And I run a nonprofit called Exploring Reality. So the whole entire point of Exploring Reality is to kind of like bridge the gap from pop level / lay audience to the scholarship. And so one of my biggest influences is Josh Rasmussen. We talk a lot, and Travis, and he actually put this really well for me recently. And he kind of just said, like, what I do a really good job of, and what I try to do, is translate the scholarship for the lay audience without losing that depth of insight.
Yeah.
And that's really what I try to do. That's where my heart really goes for, because with the ministry, I'm not trying to be the next William Lane Craig. I'm not trying to be the next great philosopher or theologian. My heart goes out to evangelism and equipping Christians to be able to spread the gospel more effectively in a loving way.
Yeah.
So
And
that's what I do.
Yeah, Than, you're really good at because you and I read like most of the same philosophical literature, have the same views. One thing I've noticed about you is you're really good at taking these deeply philosophical ideas and language and putting it into terms that the average
That Tyler
listener
can understand.
like simplifying it, like keeping its academic rigor, but simplifying it. He's really good at that. Really good at that.
So he's like Frank
Appreciate that.
Turek. I mean,
No.
no.
Oh, come on, Dan's my friend. Don't say that.
No. You know what? I see the criticism. I'm just joking. But no, guys, like, seriously, like, I'm honored to have both of you guys here. Than, you're way ahead of me. When I was a Christian in 6 years, I was still part of a fundamentalist movement, and I just didn't get it. I didn't get it all, like what you're doing. And it took the next 7 years for me to get there. So I really appreciate how God has just, I mean, he just entrenched you early on, man. And that's,
Yeah, it's
That's
only by.
good.
I was just gonna say it's only by God's grace, man.
and that's how it usually is,
God's
you know what I
grace.
mean?
Yeah.
And it took me a while because I guess he took the first 7 years, even though I was part of that movement, he took those first 7 years and taught me what it meant to have a relationship with him, you
Yeah.
know? So by the time I got into apologetics, I already had the relationship solid, even though I was questioning everything and I was doubting, and stuff like that. So I think he prepared me because probably if I started that route, I probably wouldn't be a Christian. I probably would have went the opposite way because I didn't have that firm foundation. And Tyler, you sell yourself way too short, man. You are a smart guy, man, and that's
Yeah.
all there is to it, man. And like Travis, and I know you're working with RTD with their apologetics community. And I'm
Mhm.
gonna ask you guys this one more time. Let's get some plugs. So we'll
Okay.
start with Travis. Where can people find a lot of your work? Where can people find what you put out?
Well, see, here's the thing with my story is a little bit different. I am with the Reasons to Believe apologetics community. So part of my job in there is to really highlight and showcase a lot of their work. In fact, Than and I did a huge presentation on the fine tuning
We
argument.
did 4 episodes of that.
We did, where the bulk of
Nice.
it was from Hugh Ross's work. And so I really, can't recommend them enough. I really showcase their work. But here's the thing. See, I'm a student of the sciences. I study atmospheric science. It's in my spare free time that I have a love and passion for the philosophy of science and the philosophy of religion, and just really looking into these deep, interesting questions. But I'm not an apologist in the sense that I don't usually do this as a means of evangelism. Now I do evangelism, but I'm pretty much just an average Christian when it comes to that. So I don't have like a huge social media thing. I'm very active on Facebook, Travis Worth. I share a lot of my ideas, but yeah. So I'm actually in the sciences, but I just have a love and passion for the philosophy of religion. Mainly in my spare free time, and just sharing my thoughts about it.
That's
That's
awesome, bro.
awesome,
You
man.
know what's cool? Like, we had Tim Stratton on, Dr. Tim Stratton, and
Right.
he said that a lot of us apologists, we don't have very big followings, and so whenever we can get together and collab in just really just
Right.
fellowship
hmm
and reach out to all of those other people that we
Yeah.
maybe that we don't, you know what I'm saying? It just makes our circle
Yeah.
that much bigger. And so
See,
nobody's rock stars here, you know what I mean?
It
But
really
dude,
does.
I
But
love
you
that
know what?
mentality.
you
Yep.
bring
And
up
you
a
know
good
what?
point.
We say, we jump on there and we say those things, but like at some point we're gonna have to realize we're the next generation,
Yeah.
and but we also have to keep the mind of Christ, which is that humility of mind. And that's why I love talking to you guys, man. Dan, just real
Right.
quick, plug your show, plug
Yeah,
Exploring
please.
Reality for me, man.
Yeah, sure. The first thing I do want to say is I don't know if you were there, David, but Tyler and I were just talking about that too. So I really want to speak on the whole nobody's a rock star thing, because I that's like the Exploring Reality DNA, dude. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not trying to be the next Craig. I'm trying to equip Christians to be a bunch of Craigs all over the world, right? So I just
that's what
really
we
wanted to
need.
speak on that, like, because nobody's a rock star except for Christ. Let's be honest. So
Amen.
Right.
that being said, you can find me on Exploring Reality, the YouTube channel. I'm on TikTok, but I'm not like really that active on there. And I have people like Michael and like Eric, who all run their own YouTube channels, kind of give me crap for that because they want me to keep being active on there. So I'll probably start doing that again. I have a website called exploring-reality.com. So if you guys ever have any questions for me, like for anybody that's listening to this, or ever see a topic you want me to cover and make a video on, you can submit that stuff, ask questions. Again, it's exploring-reality.com.
Mhm.
And I am a nonprofit, so I run completely off of donations. I work
That's
4
awesome.
a.m. to 11 o'clock in the morning as a personal trainer, and then the rest of the time is ministry and family stuff. So yeah, if you ever want to support or want to talk to me about that, email me through the website.
Amen.
Right on, man. So, guys, like this is I'm turning it over to you guys. So I'm gonna let you guys tell everybody what this is about, and
Okay.
what this argument is. That what are we exploring here? We're exploring the foundations of reality.
Right.
Let us know what that is, and then just give us the presentation, man. Hit us with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, one thing to really highlight is value. Value is going to be very important here. In fact, everyone here and the listeners are very valuable because we're going to make the case that the foundation of ultimate reality, what we're going to call God, is unlimited value. And that's going to, allow us to make predictions about what sort of states of affairs we should expect to find in the world. And we're going to be going with a hypothesis that ultimate reality is the foundation of ultimate reality is absolute perfection with purely positive properties and no arbitrary limits.
Yeah. So that's our hypothesis. So for
Yeah.
I find that it's actually really valuable to kind of even break a word down like that, because I think
Okay.
very often when I'm presenting a lot of these ideas to people, the word hypothesis even carries with it some baggage that we might need to liberate the people from.
Right.
So when we're talking about a hypothesis, especially when it comes to like the grand scheme of things, like a grand story of what reality actually is, what we're really coming up with is a coherent model or a story to explain the data. And we want to do that in a few different ways. And the way we kind of adjudicate between which hypotheses are the best ones is kind of what we'll present here. That's kind of like the background that you might need to know going into this.
Absolutely.
So, do we want to kind of bring up our slides here, Travis?
We
Can I jump in real quick? Can I
please.
just ask a question? Travis, you mentioned positive. What exactly do you mean by, I think you said positive experiences?
Positive properties. So I'm going to be breaking that down when I discuss perfection and what it entails.
Okay.
But positive qualities are basically what can be detected, like derivative of value, valuable, positive, good themes.
Okay. Cool.
So I think what'll be helpful here is when we're talking about value, right? And we're talking about something that's positive,
Right.
it's almost like asking the same question. It's almost like asking us, what is sadness? It's one of those things that's like so fundamental and so basic that we can't really define it, but we know what it is, right? Like I don't have to be like, David, you know that feeling sadness, and then I can't describe it to you, but when I ask you what if you know what sadness is, you know what it is because you have direct awareness with it, right? In the same sense, I think we all have this intuitive, like axiological sense, and by axiological I mean that's value. We all have this like value realm, or this value driven lens that we can see the world through, and a good thought experiment to kind of just get you to see what we're talking about here, just again through direct acquaintance, is like a thought experiment. So for instance, two hypothetical scenarios. My wife knows that I have to work, and so she puts a potion in my soup to make me causally determines me to spend time with her, right? That's scenario one. Scenario two, my wife knows I need to work, but she wants to spend time with me, so she asks me to spend time with her, and I, out of free will, decide, well, I'm going to sacrifice some work time so I can spend some time with you. Like intuitively, right? Which one of those scenarios is more valuable?
The second one,
right? And so that's kind of like what we're pointing to here, is like we can see value just very clearly. That's not me saying it's infallible, that site's infallible, but we can see value. And what Travis and I are trying to say here is that there's tons of different things we can see in the world that are very valuable. Through direct awareness, we can sense that they're valuable. And that's kind of like what we mean by value. We can.
Right.
And if you want to add to that.
Yeah. And so what we're going to be going with, so I'm going to give, before we get into the actual slides and the technicalities, here's just a brief overview that the foundation of ultimate reality is absolute perfection, with no arbitrary limits. And so part of having no arbitrary limits is unlimited goodness, unlimited value. And so we can detect, there was something called the diffusion principle that we'll get into, but basically, unlimited value would predict that there be valuable states of affairs. In fact, my good friend Tim Howard and I were talking on the phone recently, and he gave me a good way to kind of define how we would predict define something valuable. So you think of like a Euclidean plane or even the universe, something like that, and you have a dart and you throw a dart at it. Anywhere the tip of that dart lands, we should be able to detect some value. So that kind of helps give, an analogy of what we mean when, we would expect to find valuable states of affairs if the foundation is unlimited value.
So Travis, before we jump in, can you just also define, because you said this a couple of times now, what you mean by arbitrary limits?
Arbitrary limit.
That's
you're going to get into that
with the presentation.
Okay, yeah,
it's in our slides
for
and
it.
stuff. Yeah.
Just tell me to shut up.
No, you're
Shut up, David.
Yeah, go ahead, go for it, guys.
all right. Bring up. I can't bring him up, so I think you guys have to press the magic switch.
Where did we want to start then?
Probably right here.
Okay.
So just for the second, for the sake of the audience, I think our argument here is actually really modest too.
Yes.
And I really want to highlight that. All right, we have a very sorry, I just saw somebody in the chat say something. We have a very modest claim here. It's not a deductive claim. All we're really saying here is the probability of theism, given our data, is higher than the probability of atheism. Or for those people that are listening that want to define atheism as a lack of belief, I also accommodate that here and say that's fine. It's higher than the probability of the negation of theism. And with that, then we should just be affirming the more rational position, which is that theism is true. So it's not saying that necessarily God exists or anything like that. We're just saying the most rational position given the data, the most probable position given the data, is this theistic hypothesis. Anything you want to add to that, Travis?
No, I think it's good. There's what's known as the theoretical virtues, because these are grand competing theories, So you have something akin to theism or atheism, or let's just say the negation of a perfect, foundation.
Yeah.
And so, there's a certain criteria. Well, we want to look at which is more probable, which would best explain the states of affairs we find, which is more simple, has more explanatory power, can it unify independent pieces of data. And so our argument is going to be that, like you said, the probability of theism, given the data we present, is going to be higher than the probability of atheism or the negation of theism.
Yep. All right. So, Travis, this one's yours. Go for it.
Okay, yeah. So what I kind of like to start with is just talking about absolute perfection. And I think we can see perfection through two lenses. Through the first lens, we see what perfection lacks. Perfection lacks defects. Here I define a defect as anything that detracts from a thing's value. A perfect thing has no defects at all. The second lens, lets us see what perfection has. Perfection has value, and it's the highest form of value. In general, more value means more qualities that are more positive. The highest value has the most positive properties. Here I'm calling the highest value absolute perfection. A perfect thing, then, is the greatest, most valuable kind of thing. A perfect thing has no defects of any kind. It is purely positive. In other words, perfection implies supreme value. So the question becomes, how much value does the foundation have? Does it have any value? First, consider the hypothesis that the foundation has no value. Then the foundation has no positive aspects of any kind. So on this theory, the foundation is either completely neutral or negative. If the foundation has no value, then we face a construction problem. How can value arise from non-value? Materials with no value do not all of a sudden produce value. So we would run into what's known as a construction error. There are two reasons why I think value cannot come from non-value. First, the very power to produce value is itself valuable. Consider the power to serve other people. Your very power to serve people is a valuable feature that you possess. It allows you to add value to the world. Therefore, let's see, the ultimate foundation has the ultimate ability to add value to the world, since it obviously has the ability to add you and I. And so, therefore, the ultimate foundation must have at least some value. Another reason I think the foundation has value is the foundation as value is in virtue of its valuable attributes. For example, the foundation's nature includes the rules of reason. Rules or principles of reason are themselves valuable since they protect us from harm. Also, the foundation's nature includes the moral standard. A moral standard has value, and therefore the foundation's nature has value. Supposing then that the foundation does have value, we can ask how much value does it have? A foundation that is pure actuality or purely positive would probably be a better word, purely positive, lacks arbitrary limits or cutoffs without explanation. By reason, then, the foundation lacks limits in value. The foundation at least has some value for the reasons I've just mentioned. Therefore, the foundation must have value without limit. This results from my defining perfection as something that lacks defects and has supreme value. The foundation has no defects, for a defect is a limit in some positive valuable aspect, and the foundation has no limit in value. And the foundation has supreme value because anything less would mark a limit in its total value. In this sense, the foundation is purely positive without any limit or imperfection, so it is perfect. Absolute perfection is the most powerful property conceivable. From perfection flows the ultimate basis for every positive quality. To be perfect is to be purely positive. A perfect foundation includes the greatest conceivable concentration of positive qualities. We could call such a perfect foundation maximally great, as the term maximally great describes the highest degree of greatness. The relationship between maximal greatness and perfection is like the relationship between the highest mountain on earth and Mount Everest. It's the same thing. So similarly, absolute perfection is the highest degree of greatness. It is maximal greatness. And so it is maximal greatness of unlimited power. The foundation has no arbitrary boundaries, gaps, or limits. Therefore, the foundation's power cannot be arbitrarily limited. It has unlimited maximum power and goodness. The foundation is perfect and without arbitrary limits. By reason, therefore, the foundation has maximal unlimited knowledge. So based on absolute perfection with no arbitrary limits, I'm going to appeal to Joshua Rasmussen's argument for a maximum mind. So premise one, the foundation lacks arbitrary, unexplained limits. For example, a limit in size, shape, or causal powers. Premise two, a foundation with less than maximal conceivable power has an arbitrary, unexplained limit. 3. Therefore, the foundation has maximal conceivable power. 4. Maximal conceivable power includes maximal cognitive power. 5. Therefore, the foundation has maximal cognitive power. 6. Only a mind can have cognitive power. And so 7, therefore, the foundation has or is a mind. Perfection accounts for the self-sufficiency of the foundation because the foundation that is not self-sufficient is not perfect, while a perfect foundation is self-sufficient. Every positive attribute flows from the foundation's perfect nature. And so, like we have here on the slide, I kind of like to get into how perfection can kind of unify the observation and states of affairs that we find in the world. So perfection unifies all the attributes of the foundation. Perfection is the deepest attribute from which all positive attributes flow. From this singular aspect arises the foundation's moral nature, to act perfectly, its mathematical nature, to reason perfectly, its great power to fine-tune a world for people like you and me. Perfection accounts for the self-sufficiency of the foundation. A foundation that is not self-sufficient is not perfect, while a perfect foundation, as I mentioned, is self-sufficient. Every positive attribute flows from the foundation's perfect nature. Perfection also unifies the world. The world includes diverse dimensions like mental, material, moral, and mathematical. So why do these dimensions populate our world? Here's why. These diverse dimensions all flow from a single root. They all flow from pure perfection in the foundation. From pure perfection flows the perfect way of being, which is the foundation of all moral principles. From pure perfection flows perfect knowledge, which is the foundation of all principles of reason and mathematics. Moreover, a perfect mind has every reason to create a material world suitable for other minds. The perfection of the foundation then successfully predicts every dimension or state of affair in our world that we find.
Awesome. So that's kind of like our. So what Travis just did is a lot of work to kind of lay out our hypothesis and why our hypothesis, which would be some sort of consciousness that is at fundamental reality that lacks arbitrary limits, that is pure perfection. That he's kind of laid out why that's the case and what we can kind of like a lot of the groundwork up from it, and we'll kind of dig into a little bit some more. Somebody did ask an interesting question in the chat. I think it's really important to kind of bring up. Somebody asked, the foundation of reality by definition grounds the totality. Oh, wow. How did you know? And if it is absolute perfection, how does this also account for the negative properties present in reality? And so this is kind of a deep in the weeds question. So I'll try to translate. Right. This is one of those things I haven't been able to translate that well yet. So if it gets lost, you guys like help, let me know. But basically, what I want to say here is something along the lines of this. We can account for any negative properties we see or negative value that we see in the world in virtue of the fact that certain negative values are there necessarily in virtue of some greater values that are there. So, for instance, forgiveness is a very valuable thing, but that supersedes from some sort of wrongdoing. And so in that sense, we can take into account these negative values that kind of obtain in the world in virtue of the fact that they're necessary for some greater value that needs to be instantiated.
Yeah, that's well said. And I would also say that that's going to actually be part of the predictions that a perfect foundation would make. So this is going to get into a lot of Trent Doherty's work. In other words, there's a certain and this can be included in, the prediction of fine-tuning of other minds. There's a certain fine-tuning of a virtue-producing world, a world that's capable of producing the highest virtues, includes very significant trials. And so we can kind of get into this too in the argument. But there's a certain fine-tuning of a class of worlds. Like, you can't have a world that's so mild and the trials are so small that we don't build virtue, that because it's only like through danger that we obtain courage, and it's through sadness that we develop compassion, and so you can't have a world that's too mild, but you also can't have a world that's so overwhelming that it devastates the majority of people. And so one thing to take into consideration in the hypothesis we're going with is the afterlife is an entailment of absolute perfection. It's not an auxiliary hypothesis. It's actually entailed. And so the argument we're going with is that the creation is a saint fostering environment, that embodied moral agents and, in my judgment, future animals participate in a world that's capable of producing the highest virtues. And this would also get into the defeat condition, that the evils and sufferings will be integrated into a composite valuable whole and defeated, and that the moral agents will be better off for the temporary imperfections.
Hey guys, let me jump in real quick. So Josh actually asked a really good question that I think hits on this quite beautifully, really. Can we define positive and negative value more explicitly? Is it good and evil or something more particular?
So that kind of goes into what we said earlier, at least in my opinion, which is this idea that I don't know that you can define positive value and negative value in such a way that's super explicit. Just in the same way that I can't really define sadness in a way that's super explicit and obvious.
Right. It's
Like,
kind of like direct awareness.
Yeah, you just have direct awareness, like through introspection of what this is. And I think that's the best way for somebody to see it and know what it is.
What do you guys think of this? Would we know, because this actually came up on Faith Unaltered before a couple times, but would we know what good or let's define it as positive, right? Will we know what positive things are if not for the negative that seem to coincide with each other? Does that make sense?
So I'm a little skeptical of that claim. I don't think we need the negative to be able to see the positive. I think that there are reasons why the negative is there.
Okay.
But you get what I'm saying? Like, I don't know that we can make the claim that we need the negative in order to see the positive. Because at least on my view, I would hold to some sort of privation theory that says really the negative is more of the privation of the positive.
You know,
what I would say, hold on. I would say like you don't need the rust in a car to know that you know you have a good car. You know, I mean, you know you have a good car because it's a good car. But if there's rust, then you know you have the defect type thing, right?
Yeah, that reminds me of Augustine with his work on beauty. He would say something like, you know, ugliness, some degree of ugliness is necessary to see like true beauty. And I get that argument, but I wouldn't affirm it myself.
Yeah, but there are reasons for the negative.
Yes. In fact, that's why I wanted to make sure I was clear when I defined like a saint fostering environment that produces the highest virtues. I wanted to make sure everyone followed what I said there.
Yeah.
Did we're all on the same page?
Yep.
I mean, I wanted to make sure it was clear to everyone.
No,
I got some questions, but I want you guys to present them because you might answer them, and then I won't have to ask.
Fair
them.
enough.
So,
Okay.
so keep going, guys.
So our basic argument, it can be broken up into two stages. So the first stage, I'm going to say that theism is a simpler hypothesis than any sort of atheological theory, because it makes less foundational commitments. And this is an important step in our process because this is kind of like a Bayesian argument. So this is important because the simpler the hypothesis is, the higher its prior probability is. Okay. The second step then is we're going to say that theism has more explanatory power and can account for the data better than any sort of atheological theory. And so pretty much what we're saying is the world looks more like what we would expect to see if God exists than if God doesn't exist.
Right.
So that's kind of like the basic two-step version of what we're saying here. We'll kind of explicate what we're really trying to say there. But do you have any questions on that or anything you want to add in, Travis?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, so theism is simpler than atheism because, you know, there's two types of simplicity. There's the number of things posited and the number of the properties of the things posited. And we're saying that theism is simple on both accounts because we're only positing absolute perfection.
Yeah, we're going to go into that.
Yeah, so it's perfection. That's only one thing. So that's only one thing. Whereas naturalism, you know, it would be like, let's say, a quantum field with multiple properties, and they're going to be arbitrary limits. And so the thing with arbitrary limits is, you know, they're cutoffs without explanation. So, you know, naturalism doesn't make predictions. And so, you know, the states of affairs we would find on naturalism, you would have to ask why this way, not that way. And the explanations are going to be arbitrary. And like Than alluded to, that when you have to add theoretical content into your theory to solve isolated problems, it lowers the probability of the hypothesis, making a more parsimonious explanation favorable.
Yeah.
And so theism has that, absolute perfection is simple. And like I went over, it would lead us to expect the observations. It has that unifying explanatory power.
Yep.
So,
So I just want to lay out what Bayesian is, like a Bayesian argument really is. And so
pizza.
what's this pizza picture, right? Okay, so I'm just gonna lay out like a little thought experiment. So like, just close your eyes. Imagine you have your favorite pizza in the world, and you're going to work at the office the next day. Okay.
DiGiorno's.
Okay, fine. We have this DiGiorno pizza, and you're going to the office, and you have a slice of DiGiorno pizza, and it's take heed, right? Like, it's not a stuffed crust pizza or anything like that. It looks like this. So you go to your office, you put it in the fridge, and lunchtime comes around, and you are missing this pizza. It's not in your fridge anymore.
It's terrible.
Well, okay, so now you have to like ask the question, like, what is the explanation of this missing pizza?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's 3 people in the office. That's in your background knowledge. So there's 3 hypotheses that you can have: person 1, 2, and 3. Person 1, she has a wedding in 2 weeks and has motivation, obviously, to like not eat pizza because she wants to lose weight. Person 2 is lactose intolerant, and so if he did eat on the condition, right, that he did eat the pizza, there's things that we would expect to see. So this is where we kind of start going into conditional probability. So on the condition that person 2 ate the pizza, there's something we would expect to see, mainly like him farting a bunch and running to the bathroom and having, right? Because he's lactose intolerant, and there's a bunch of cheese on here.
Right.
Person 3 has a role, like a history of taking people's food.
It's person 3.
So, okay. So right now we're kind of assessing the prior probability of those 3 people. We generated a hypothesis. Now we're assessing the prior probability off of what we know. So like, for instance, in order to say that person 1 took the pizza, I'd have to like make an assumption and add on and like tack on an extra hypothesis to that person 1 hypothesis to say that they had motivation somehow to eat this pizza, even though there's no entailments that would tell us that they have a motivation. So I start talking to them just in case, and I get some new data along the way. I actually just found out person 1 wasn't even in the building. She was at Sue Salads down the road. So the posterior data now drastically lowers the probability of the person 1 hypothesis because she wasn't even in the room. Person 2, we found out that they actually have like red sauce on their pants. But here's the thing: that red sauce is from them eating pasta. And so that posterior end lowers the probability of the person 2 hypothesis. So I'm updating my beliefs as I'm doing, like, right. Then I go to the person 3 hypothesis, and I'm expecting, right, that person 3 is the one who did it because that's my last candidate that's left. I go there. I actually find a pizza crust in the garbage, but it's stuffed crust pizza.
Heresy.
And so I ask him, like, well, did you take my pizza? I know, like, you have stuffed crust pizza crust in the garbage. He was like, no, well, I just had stuffed crust pizza, and it was buffalo chicken pizza. So now I'm like, okay, so it wasn't this guy, because he has 4 pizza crusts that are stuffed crust pizza. So obviously he doesn't like pizza crust. So if he took my pizza too, I would see some normal pizza crust in there, and I don't. So I don't know if it was him. So I'm frustrated. I go to the warehouse in the back just to kind of vent, right? And lo and behold, there's a 4th person I didn't know about in the building, and he is eating my pizza. Okay, so the whole entire point of that thought experiment is just to kind of line out, like, this is how we think every day. We update our beliefs as we come, like, we generate hypotheses to explain data. We assess the prior probability of the hypotheses, and then we assess the probability of the hypothesis on the posterior end by evaluating data And then anytime we get new data, we shove that into our background knowledge and then update our beliefs and update the probabilities as we keep getting new data. And this is pretty much how we're going to do the argument. It's just a normal way of thinking. This is how philosophers of science, scientists, and philosophers do all of this. But I just find this really helpful because when you hear Bayesian epistemology and Bayesian probability theory, it sounds crazy, but this is just how normal everyday people think. Were you going to say something, Travis?
Oh, yeah. So that's really good outlining Bayes, because, one of my passions is the philosophy of science. And I'm a Bayesian myself, but I also use abduction, which is also crucial to science. And I can quickly go over what that is, or do we want to just stick with the Bayesian?
It's up to you.
Inference to the best explanation. So that would be roughly like, let's say, you wake up in the morning, you look outside your window and you see the streets wet. Well, one explanation is that, aliens came and just dropped water out of their spaceship and everything. That's a possible explanation that would explain the data. Then another explanation is that, it's raining, it's been raining. So you look out, you see, that it's cloudy. And so you have like 2 or 3 different hypotheses that would explain the phenomena. And so when you want to ask, what's the best explanation of the data that I'm seeing, you would look at, what's simple. Would it unify independent pieces of data? Does it have the explanatory power? Is it modest? And so there are certain times when I think observations are best done through just looking at it and asking what the best explanation of the theory is. And I think that's compatible with Bayes. So I kind of use both.
That's funny.
Just
all right.
to...
So let's talk about simplicity. So like I said, we can assess the prior probability of hypotheses through the simplicity of, and just the theoretical virtues of, like Travis just brought up. And so simplicity allows us to assess the prior probability of hypothesis. So there's 2 ways to assess simplicity. One way that a lot of people like to try to use is pretty much like this. These 2 blobs represent worldviews. And so we can assess simplicity in this way. For instance, I can count up people and flowers, cows, everything in each of these worldviews and say, well, clearly worldview 2 is simpler than worldview 1 because it has less things in it. But there's an issue with that. The issue is that it would just kind of undercut a lot of different things. There's counterexamples to this. And so right here, this little thing kind of represents our standard model of particle physics. This is something that I hope all of us believe. And pretty much what we're saying here is that at fundamental reality, there's 16 fundamental particles that we can't see, we can't touch. We can just there's a theoretical postulates to explain data in need of explanation. Now, here's the thing. If we measured simplicity, in that way, like I said previously, well, it would undercut the standard model of particle physics.
Right.
We would it'd be simpler by that light to say, well, we don't have these standard 16 standard particle physics model. We now are just going to say all the data that we're trying to explain doesn't have an explanation. And the data that doesn't have an explanation just explains the data in need of an explanation. And then you can just keep going and going and going. And you can kind of see how this just undercuts pretty much all, like a bunch of scientific inquiry. So
less isn't always more, is what you're saying, man.
So not necessarily.
Okay.
Because it's the way you measure it.
Yeah.
So if you see here, I have a theory bar and a worldview bar. So what we're actually should be measuring is the theory, not the worldview. And so in that sense, I'm saying the theist is saying at fundamental reality, our theory is one entity with one property, perfection. No arbitrary limits or cutoff points. So it's like ultimately simple.
Yes.
And then from there, we explain things that are in need of explanation, and that explanatory chain just keeps going. The non-theist, I don't see how they're going to so one thing with one property, no arbitrary limits, infinite in value, infinite in whatever property it has.
Yeah.
The non-theist, I don't see how they're going to escape having 16 fundamental particles at fundamental reality. So there's 16 things at least. Each have their own arbitrary limits in terms of spin, drift, all this other stuff that you get into physics. And so this is really complicated right off the bat. Does this make sense what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and if need be, I can clarify it too.
Okay. So now the question's like, why is zero limitation simpler? And I think that's probably a fair question if anybody's thinking that.
Yeah. What you said is really important, though, Than. That we made clear to the audience that just because you like often it's claimed, well, naturalism is simpler because it's not positing more entities. So there are two kinds of simplicity: the number of things posited and the number of the properties of the things posited. And so that's I think what you said is really important to take into consideration when we're considering simplicity, and that's how it's used in scientific theories. So what Dan said, laid out for metaphysics, is exactly how we do simplicity in the philosophy of science.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, our simplicity is important because it raises the simpler the hypothesis, the higher the probability of the hypothesis is, because there's a simple way of putting this is the less things that you're kind of putting forth into your hypothesis and tacking on and building into your hypothesis, the less things you have to get
Right.
wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way of putting it. If you want some more stuff on like why simplicity is better and why simplicity is evidence, we can get into that, or I can show you just different places we can get to.
Yeah, and we'll have some recommendations for further reading at the end.
Yeah. So back to why zero's like limitation is simpler. So just imagine this for now. Imagine the foundation of reality has the following basic attributes: a mass of 241 grams, the shape of a sphere, and the capacity to produce exactly 288 particles. These attributes are limits, in other words, arbitrary limits, a cutoff with no explanation. Each cutoff adds complexity to the theory of the basic nature of the foundation, right? Since each cutoff requires additional information to describe the nature of this fundamental entity. By contrast, imagine a foundation with these basic attributes: no mass, no shape, and the capacity to produce any number of particles. This theory requires fewer basic attributes and is simpler to describe. The foundation's like basic nature could then be described without listing any of these limits. And then so through like the tool of simplicity, a theory of a limitless foundation is more internally likely than a more complex theory than the one we just looked at. And so again, simplicity kind of helps us see this. And we can kind of see this like throughout scientific inquiry all the time. So for instance, when it comes to the speed of light, our current like measurement, right, is 299,792,458 meters per second. Before the data that we have today, though, we actually used to postulate that it was infinite. I think it was in the 70s. We postulated an infinite speed of light. And then as we come across new data that disconfirms that, we kind of keep lowering that until we get as close as possible that we can to kind of make sense of it given the data. But before we had data that disconfirmed this infinite time, we went towards infinite time. And then as we came across new data, just like that pizza thought experiment, we updated our beliefs. So again, just kind of in summation, the theist theory, one entity with one property, perfection, held in the simplest way, infinite. The atheist is going to have to at least have these as fundamental. And there's tons of other things that the atheist is going to have to commit to, most likely, especially if like they're a moral realist and they hold to fine-tuning data and all this other stuff, right? And so you can kind of see how the ontology of this of the atheist theory is just going to keep stacking up and stacking up and stacking up.
A lot of brute facts.
Yes. Where ours is just going to be, like I said, one entity, one property, held in the simplest way.
So, guys, let me ask you this real quick. I don't, Dan. So, Ethan, I think, brings a good point. He says, "I feel like this leads to some limitless God. Is the real God and not
Sorry,
what?"
sorry. I was gonna have you hold off on that question, but it's that you're already asking it. You might as well go
I mean,
ahead.
I can wait. Go ahead.
Yeah, let them finish, and let's bring that up at the end because I do have some things for that, and I think Ethan is on to something that I do want to talk about as we get around to this.
Okie doke.
Okie dokie.
But you're on it, Tyler. I think thanks for that.
Okay, so far, like, our argument is this: the prior probability of theism is higher than the probability of not theism.
Yeah.
Or atheism. Like, I'm trying to when I made these slides, I'm trying to accommodate people that are defining atheism as a lack of belief.
Sure.
That's all. Anything you want to add into that, Travis? Or
no, I think you did a great job of explaining how, we're only positing perfection. It's a simple ontology. And one thing is, we look at the initial hypothesis, what the initial theory is, and then there's entailments of that, but the entailments of a theory don't count against its simplicity. Right. We look at the initial hypothesis, so that's one thing.
Not what it causes or its effects or anything.
Right. So, for example, a naturalist, we would look at the properties of a quantum field that produces a multiverse, not just count up all the universes. And the same thing with theism, saying that God has all these different aspects. While that's true, it's all derivative of perfection. So the only thing we're positing is perfection, and these other things are epistemically teased out from perfection. So that's really good to make clear. And what we're saying is, based upon the data, the probability of theism is higher than the probability of its negation.
All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the hypothesis, explanatory power. So this is just the hypothesis ability to make sense of data, or you could say like how expectable the data is on the condition that the hypothesis is true. So in terms of explanatory power for theism, what we're saying is we're asking the question we're asking is like, what's the probability of any data point X on the condition that the hypothesis that God exists is true? And so what Travis and I are going to say is that theism predicts valuable states of affairs. And this is something we can affirm through something called the Dionysian principle. Right. If you want some literature on this, a good book is called The Metaphysics of Theism. And so basically the Dionysian principle, also Richard Swinburne's The Existence of God is really good for this.
Right.
Pretty much it just says that goodness is...
Hey, can you, Athan, real quick, before you go any further, can you just jump back to one slide and just say that very slowly again? You said theism predicts valuable states of affairs.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
So anything that's valuable, right? It's something that's going to be expected on theism.
And I needed to also add, the way we define value are in the categories of moral, aesthetic, and alethic. So those are the subcategories of value. And theism predicts, under the Dionysian principle, that goodness is diffusive of itself and of being. So we would expect to find valuable states of affairs.
Yeah. So that's what that Dionysian principle says. So this would just say that God would have motivation to create valuable states of affairs. Right. And so formalize then the probability of any data point that we find, given, that's what this little symbol right here means. The probability of any data point given theism is in direct proportion to the intrinsic value of any data point. So anything that's modestly valuable is going to be modestly expected on theism. Anything that's highly valuable is going to be highly expected on theism, and so on and so forth. And so I want to talk about this a little bit, because this is where I think we can get a little skeptical, and I think it might just be really helpful. This is from Josh Rasmussen's book, How Reason Can Lead to God. So if it looks like I'm reading, it's because I kind of paraphrased some of the things that he says, but I think what he says is really valuable.
It is.
Pun intended. So
It's
so
all
how to
about
see
value.
yeah. So how do you see value? Okay, so to answer this question, we need to see a distinction between two types of value. First, there's value that can reflect preference. For example, if I like chocolate ice cream, then chocolate ice cream has a positive, valuable taste to me. But this just reflects a preference. Another type of value that we're going to talk about, though, is that like a nature that's independent from preference. So some examples of this are going to be like honesty, kindness, generosity, rationality, you. These things have value, right? And so these things, they don't have value that depends on somebody's preference. In fact, the relationship of the preference actually seems to be explained by the fact that the preference is explained by the fact that they are intrinsically valuable most of the time. So for instance, I don't value kindness just because it makes me feel nice. I value people that are kind because I think kindness is intrinsically valuable. So how can we like see these things? We kind of talked on this, but step like one of these is going to be through direct awareness.
Right.
The easiest way to see this is like just through your own mind. For example, you can see that 2 + 2 = 4 within your mind. In the same way, you can see sadness differs from happiness. And you can see that thoughts about rabbits are about rabbits and so on. And so in all these cases, you have like direct mental awareness of certain elements within your own experience. And so for your consideration, you also have the power to see value in your mind. And just a quick test to do that is check to see if you have any positive emotions like peace or happiness within you. If you sense any of these positive emotions within you, that positivity is itself value. And positivity is an example of what I mean by value. And so if I say something like, Travis, you're wonderful, you're beautiful, you're intelligent, you're a piece of crap, but you're tall, like, right? Like you sensed it through direct awareness, right?
Right.
What's there?
A lot of times when I use direct awareness in terms of religious experience or like an awareness of the Holy Spirit, in worship, that can even be a form of direct awareness. I'm directly aware of, our conversation right now.
Yeah. Another method of seeing value is by uniformity. And so suppose we say that the sense of value never detects any real value, then we fall into like a pit of skepticism. So like if we're going to say that we can't use our sense of value, we fall into this weird pit. Because if we're going to say that, like, if we're going to question whether or not we can actually sense value, then perhaps all senses, like visual, auditory, and so on, are all illusions. If we can only say that some of our senses are windows to reality, but some of them aren't, well, that kind of breaks this principle of uniformity that I think we want to have. So suppose, for example, you trust your hearing, but not your vision. You think hearing reveals real pitches while vision reveals nothing. And that like seems silly, right? That seems counterintuitive. But in the same way, I think it's arbitrary and unmotivated to distrust our sense of our moral and value intuitions for no reason. And so without a principled reason to like distinguish this, I don't think that we have reason to doubt through the principle of uniformity our senses. Okay, Travis, anything?
No, I think you covered that very well. We recognize value through direct awareness. I have direct awareness of value. There's something that it's like to sense value, and it's that cognitive, awareness. I think you did a great job on that.
And then, so the last thing I'm just going to say is by desire. We can sense these things too. So if we deny the reality of all value, it leads to an irony. If I deny the reality of value, then to be consistent, I'm actually going to have to deny that my denial has any value. And once I see that my denial of all value has no value, then how could you motivate me to continue to deny value if there is no value in denying value? And so like, how could I desire, for instance, to deny value once I see there is absolutely no value in doing so? And so it seems to me that denying the existence of value is like denying the existence of meaning. Denying meaning is self-defeating because the statement that no statements have no meaning is itself meaningless if it's true. So why think it? It seems to me that denying value is similarly self-defeating. The belief that nothing has value has no value if it's true. So why endorse the belief? I think the root of the problem is that it just seems to me that we have desires and those desires have a basis. When you desire to seek truth, it's because you have a desire to seek truth. And so I think with like all these tools through direct awareness, uniformity, and desire, we can see value pretty clearly. It's not infallible, but we can tread these waters with a degree of confidence. Nothing, Travis?
No, I think you're hitting the direct awareness pretty well. I can't really think of anything to add in addition to what you've covered on seeing value through direct awareness.
Okay. So we have like a short little like, I think you can hit the fine tuning stuff or whatever you want, Travis.
I can.
So basically, like we have two data points that kind of go hand in hand here, but fine tuning of the universe and embodied conscious moral agents. And so basically what we're saying is the probability of a life permitting universe given theism is higher than the probability of a life permitting universe given not theism. And so just defining a law of nature, it's a regularity and causal powers and liabilities of various kinds of objects in the real world. That's all. So we have like 4 fundamental forces. Travis, just jump in whenever you want to. And so I don't think we're going to go through like the whole entire fine-tuning argument here.
No, I can bullet point it.
Yeah. And so like Travis and I have a 4-video series on this.
Right.
So, but go ahead. Go ahead if you want to talk on a strong nuclear.
Hey guys, real quick before you jump into that, so my babysitter's actually on her way with my little girl, and I'm gonna have to jump off here in a minute. But I want to ask you guys something because it has to do with an article I read today. It's kind of off topic, not really from what we're talking about right now, but it does kind of go off the trail just for a second. But then Travis, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. But what are your guys' thoughts on and no lie, this is how it is phrased in the article. I can link to it in the description after this is all said and done. But atheistic Christianity, it almost sounds to me like a Mary Bachelor, right? Or is there something to this new view that's kind of coming out, or what are your guys' opinions on that?
I haven't heard it. I've heard of agnostic Christianity where you're hopeful, you don't really know, but you're like hopeful. In fact, I have a few friends who would identify as agnostic Christians, but I've never heard of an atheistic Christian. I've never heard of it.
I'll send you the link. Here.
Yeah, I would need to really digest it and like kind of play it out and see how, because like the philosopher in me wants to like, well, okay, let's take this and see how it plays out and competes with other things. So I can't really give an informed opinion yet.
In the article, and then Than, I want your thoughts on it. But basically one of their key concepts is denying that God is personal. And I'm just, off the top, on the surface, I'm thinking that you can't. One of the fundamental beliefs of a Christian is the fact that Jesus, right, is the Son of the Father and is the second person of the divine Trinity, right? And to deny that God is personal and not just some higher power, but there's actual personal aspects to God. It seems like a fundamental flaw in the logic, if you ask me. You cannot claim that God is not personal and yet still claim the title of Christian, in my opinion. Than, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I just have to know more about it before I speak on it. I don't like speaking on stuff that I don't know about.
I agree.
That's the way I am.
So y'all have to send me stuff before I can like make an informed opinion on it.
So Than, like, and Travis, like, are we at a good point to ask some questions about perfection and stuff, and then kind of get that out of the way before we get into fine tuning? Because I really want.
I wanted to interrupt.
Full disclosure, I got like 20 minutes left before we go this.
Yeah, so I mean,
the time however you want.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Travis. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say I can go into how protons and neutrons stick together in atomic nuclei, the repelling force, the ratio of electron to proton, all that stuff. But what I was thinking might be better is just like some of the basic theistic arguments, just bullet point why absolute perfection, predicting value would kind of best explain it.
Yeah, we can do that.
Then, like going into the details of the 4 fundamental forces, the
Yeah.
laws and variables of the boundary conditions.
Yep.
That's going to be pretty consuming.
Yeah. So, okay. Basically, we'll just say this then.
Yeah.
The data that we're going to say, like that in this slideshow so far, we were going to say is fine tuning data. And it allows, and the reason why is because it allows for embodied conscious moral agents, us, and we're
Yeah.
valuable. And then this is
I would
where
just,
you
I would
wanted to
just
go, right?
add, yeah, I would just add to the fine tuning argument that what I really wanted to bullet point is you have the four forces and then the laws and variables of the boundary conditions. But and that's where a lot of philosophers will focus on that on a life permitting universe. But the fine tuning goes much deeper than that, because contingent on that fine tuning, the fine tuning grows into the supercluster of galaxy, the cluster of galaxies, the local group, the Milky Way galaxy, the solar system, the planet, moon, the conditions and of the planet, the chemistry in the environment that's correlated to biochemistry. So it's fine tuned all the way down. And a lot of times, the objection is, well, why would God want to fine tune? And what we're saying is that based on value, God would have motivation to fine tune a world for embodied moral agents to exist within a saint fostering environment, an environment where the highest amount of virtues can be built, and possibly future animals in the eschaton. So God would have motivation to fine tune a universe that fosters saints, whereas under naturalism, it would be quite surprising and it would not be predicted.
Yeah. Other things we're going to talk about, like Travis, you said you wanted to talk about like your inductive moral argument.
If you have it up there, like if you copied it.
I don't. Like, I don't have a copy and paste.
Oh God. Well, I have to look it up. I thought you copied it.
Oh, my bad.
Okay, so no, that's good. I think you guys got this up there, and you can kind of explain it as we go. I think that would be more helpful. I really want to get to because I kind of rudely interrupted Tyler here, and that wasn't my goal. My goal is just to hold off for just a second, and I want him to really ask that question, and I want him to do that before he has to leave, because I think it's really important.
Well, my babysitter's here, so I am going to have to jump off, but go ahead and ask it, and if you guys want to.
All right. It's the foundation one, right?
After you do, I'll go ahead and just do the moral argument. After
Okay, go ahead.
Like after you.
Yeah, we can answer the questions, and then
then I'll briefly highlight some arguments.
And then I got to get going soon.
Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. And
So,
we can follow up this. We can follow up on this anytime.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think this is a good question because I think it clarifies some of the concepts that we're actually talking about.
Mhm.
So I'm leaving open a lot of things here with my argument. When I say we have a simple hypothesis because we're holding something in the simplest way possible, no arbitrary limits, what we're not committing ourselves to is saying something like every single property that God has is unlimited, because I think there are things internal to God that would explain any kind of a limit. That's one thing. So like God could have limits in certain areas, but those limits will be explained internal to God's self. If the foundation is, so that's one thing that we have to take into account when we answer this question. And then the second part is like, how do we deal with that in light of the doctrine of the incarnation in the hypostatic union?
Right.
And there, I'm just going to like punt to the scholarship from like people like Joshua Sijuwati, and other people and other theologians and philosophers who have done remarkable work on the doctrine of the incarnation. I think this year, Joshua Sijuwati put up 2 papers just talking about this.
Right.
And
And
go ahead, sorry.
Swinburne has done a lot of work on that.
Travis,
Go
you
ahead,
cut out.
guys.
I'm sorry. No, I'm having a little bit of a lag. I didn't mean to interrupt Than. I'll just jump in after he's finished.
No, I'm done. You just cut out.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah. Sorry, the internet. But so there's sort of a hidden kind of thought behind this. It's like, well, does philosophical theism negate sort of Christian theism. Like that kind of seems to be the idea. If the foundation is truly unlimited, how does that count for Jesus Christ, the first century Jew? Well, there are philosophical reasons why God would want to become incarnate, have motivation to do that. Swinburne has written a lot on this, that to atone for our sins, it would be valuable to show us a moral example of how to lead our lives, to identify with our suffering. So he has valuable reasons to do this. And when we say, God has unlimited value in terms of prediction, that means when we see something value, we know that's something that God would have reason to bring about. So this doesn't in any way contradict a canonical theism. In fact, Trent Doherty has an argument that general bare theism actually entails Christian theism. And then finally, I would just add that, with the doctrine of the incarnation, that would get into kind of what I was getting into earlier with the saint fostering environment and the defeat of evil. So it's through, Christ's atonement that evil can be integrated and ultimately defeated. So I would argue that, bare theism, philosophical theism, actually entails Christian theism.
Yeah.
All right. So again, Ethan asks, I feel like this leads to some limitless God. And I know you kind of answered this. Maybe you could rephrase it with this question, but does it lead to Christ? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. How do we jump from that type of theism to the God of the Bible? Because this was my thing when I was hearing you guys talk about perfection and stuff, is that if this idea of perfection is there, it seems to me that God would have to reveal himself in some way. He would have to actually reveal himself in a specific way, especially if you're talking about this type of perfection to me. Okay, so with that, do we get the God of the Bible? Because at this point, you're going to have to deal with, okay, well, because the view you laid out, we're going to have to get to a specific God here, because he would have to reveal himself to us in some sort of way. And it would get us to a specific if
we were actually going to get into that.
I know, but we only had 15 minutes. So that's why I wanted to bring the questions out so we could get to it directly. Okay. Sorry. That's just how I moderate.
No,
that's okay. So let me just continue on this for a little bit. Okay. So God is, he has maximal goodness and maximal love. God is love. He has unlimited love. And so he has motivation to relate to us in a personal way, to tell us certain things about ourselves and about himself. And he also has motivation to give us a revelation, to tell us certain things that we're not capable of knowing on our own. For example, that he is triune. This is going right off the work of Swinburne. So God would have motivation to reveal, to give us a revelation, to tell us certain things that, we're just not capable of knowing on our own. And he would have motivation to become incarnate. So with that being said, I'm not seeing how a limitless God is in contradiction to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yeah. Unless there's something you want me to I'm not. From what I just said, I don't see how it follows that there's an issue.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that's really important to highlight here is, like, there's no incompatibility with this, because this would fall under the range of like general revelation.
Right. And
and that's what I'm saying is, like,
and we're
how do we
make that jump? That's when I'm going to start pointing to the scriptures. That's when I'm going to start.
And that's the thing is, like, do we get that with the scriptures? Because you're going to have a lot of people say that we don't, and they're going to show you things. So at this point, you're going to have to start making historical arguments.
With the scriptures.
Right.
David, that's why I wanted to highlight that, God would have motivation, this perfection unlimited, to reveal things to us, to give us a revelation of things that we're not capable of knowing on our own. For example, that he's triune, we would have no way of knowing, which incidentally, Swinburne has a good argument that that's the foundation of love, that God is eternally, that God is love because of the eternal relationship of the Trinity. But another thing is religious experience. Like I mentioned before, that God would have some motivation to relate to us in a personal way, and that so many people have had experiences of revelations of Christ, myself included. I believe, God would have motivation to seek us out and relate to us in a personal way. And then that's where I think Christian theism is entailed. So it's the I am that I am, the absolute perfection, is God, but he being unlimited love, he reaches out to us in a personal way to reveal himself through Scripture and through the inner witness of the Holy Spirit.
Right on. Tyler,
Yeah,
you got
so-
anything to jump on that with?
I just what I really want to highlight here is that this argument is not some standalone argument to prove Christianity, right?
Right.
Like I should also add in the fact that Travis and I didn't give our full fledged, like if Travis and I wanted to talk about our full case for Christian theism,
Right.
Oh, of course.
we'd be
and
here.
This is
We
gonna
would be
follow
here
up,
for
yeah.
4 hours,
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
We didn't get into the part that
Absolutely.
So
we
I
even have slides on. So.
and so I
No
think
doubt.
it's really important that like we're not just using philosophy to prove Christianity. We're going
Right.
to talk about the incarnation. We're going to actually talk about how, given theism, we actually expect an incarnation. How, given
Right,
theism,
like I
you would
just-
actually expect the resurrection. Is a claim I'm going to make.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, because like Travis and I are going to agree on something called the defeat condition. From the
Yes.
defeat condition, I'm actually going to say something like, well, if given this axiology, an incarnate God would show the defeat of evil and suffering and death itself through an incarnation.
Right. So
Right.
it flows into.
And so
That's-
it
Yeah,
works
and I just-
harmonistically
yeah.
with everything. It's not just all
Yeah,
philosophy.
and that's kind of what I just wanted to push that out there because I wanted to see if that's where you would go, on this condition.
Yeah.
I wanted to see how you would do it. In the
we
time
would
have
talk
left.
about a lot of stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we would start that the foundation of ultimate reality is absolute perfection with no limits, that it's a more simple hypothesis than
And you
atheism. Then when we start epistemically teasing out the properties of absolute perfection, I would argue that Christian theism is an entailment of absolute perfection, especially when
Yeah.
it comes to that God would have motivation to give us free will to build into sainthood and to defeat the evils. What better way than through the incarnation? So I think
And you think you
starts
can
at
do that with
perfection.
Christianity, regardless of
Right.
the objections and stuff like
Right.
that. So,
Right.
yeah.
So it flows into Christianity.
Right.
I
Okay.
think
In
you
fact,
guys would-
Trent Doherty has an
Yeah, of
argument
course,
that
yeah.
bare theism entails Christian theism.
Yeah. But David,
Mhm.
to kind of like
Yeah.
maybe bring this up into like a Christian theology sense, right? I think you guys would both agree that general revelation and special revelation are a thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm of the mind that you can't have one without the other.
Oh yeah,
I think you can't understand special
contradiction in terms.
I don't think you can
Right.
understand special revelation without general revelation.
That's a
Right.
great point.
And I don't think you can understand, and I don't think general revelation gets you to the God of the Bible.
Right.
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 And so that's why I think you need both.
Yes.
And so this is an argument from general revelation specifically, and we're pointing later on to special revelation to show the God of the Bible.
Right.
Right.
On, right on.
It's just it's a lengthier case. We start with this and it flows into Christianity. But when we stop like in the middle, we've just mainly covered bare theism without delving into Christian theism.
It just seems to me if you prove Jesus, you prove the case regardless. But anyways,
Well,
no, I hear you.
The
No, I hear
reason
you.
I think this is really
And
important,
I'm-
I actually has a lot to do with my argument for the resurrection. Like this is, for me at least,
Absolutely.
this is all. When you're thinking about Bayesianism specifically, right?
Yeah.
When we start asking the question, did Jesus rise from the dead? If all of this, if Travis and I's argument is in the background, the prior probability of the resurrection of Jesus is sky high before you even look at the data.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so,
And like one of the things is when I was thinking of perfection and how Travis was presenting this, it was like,
Mhm.
do we get that on theism? Do we get that type of perfection on theism, and how so? How do we actually get that? So I was just kind of wondering, and like, how do we tie this together, and how can we from that philosophical standpoint? But enough of me. I want to kind of hand it to Tyler to see if he's got any follow-ups, or if he wants to show the next question from Ethan.
No, actually, I've got to run, guys. So it was Than is awesome talking to you,
Yeah.
Travis. It was a
Yeah,
pleasure
absolutely.
again, and yeah, I want to go back and listen to it because a lot of it didn't make sense, but that's me. So I got to listen.
We
to
can
it a
always
couple
talk
of times.
privately too.
Let's do
Tyler.
that, Than. Let's do
Yeah,
that.
did we need to
that'll
break
help.
it down more, or?
Well, like I said, I
It's
just
just
got to
a
go
lot
back
of new
and listen.
information. I mean, think about
Yeah.
the first time you heard this, Travis. How many times did you have to reread
Yeah.
a bunch of stuff?
Yeah.
Oh
Right.
man, yeah.
So, guys, it's been
Yeah,
a
it's
pleasure.
interesting.
I've got to run. So,
Okay.
All right,
And
Tyler, love you, bro.
I
Love
got
you.
probably like another few minutes here.
yeah,
Yeah.
I do too. God
And
bless.
I only got like 2 more questions, so this
That's
was
okay.
Ethan's follow-up.
Yeah, Ethan and I are good close friends, and we talk. He disagrees
Yeah.
with natural theology. So we've had in fact, we're planning on kind of getting together and doing a discussion on this. But
That'd be pretty cool.
yeah,
I think from what I remember,
If
it's been a
God
while
is-
since I've talked to Ethan, but I think he's very Barthian. With his
he
theology.
is. And you know what's interesting with Barth is you got to remember that, like, in the days of Hume, like Christian philosophy of religion was kicked out of academia.
Oh, I know.
At that time, Barth was. That it wasn't until like the late 60s, early 70s with like Plantinga, then Swinburne, Dr. William Lane Craig in the 80s, that it kind of got back into academia. So Barth was at a time when like natural theology was not.
Yeah.
It was like an embarrassment, like and so he just completely.
So,
and
yeah,
I
so
understand that.
Yeah. So
Given that
this
time
question
period.
says, if God is truly unlimited, couldn't he have an infinite range of desires, and we couldn't predict that he would desire value?
No, but if you'll go back and listen to there's by definition what perfection entails. Perfection is value, and it's the highest degree of value. And so what we're appealing to is the Dionysian principle. Okay, so that's going to be that goodness is diffusive of itself and of being. And so we would predict that God create valuable states of affairs. Now, there is the claim that it could be that it's so unlimited that God eventually instantiates any conceivable valuable state of affair. So that hypothesis is on the table.
Right.
That's a possibility.
And this is the last question for you guys, because we're only 4 minutes out. So I mean, we're 4 minutes actually out before we gotta close.
Yeah.
So negative value negative emotions aren't valuable.
No, I know. So on our account, negative emotions are valuable because for one, they can actually be truth tracking, right? So that we can learn a lot from negative emotions. I don't know where that question came up from, but I think probably it's from that seeing value thing. The whole point is that we can't conflate the emotion with the state of affair that it inflicts that emotion, if that makes sense.
Right.
So we can't emotions are valuable, especially negative ones. If I'm sad from something, right, that's because something is I'm learning from it. It's not like I'm able to feel something, all this other stuff. So there's a lot that goes into that, but I'm just going to answer that question because I don't know.
Yeah,
that was great, guys. Yeah.
It is. I would just refer to Trent Doherty's saint-making theodicy that a lot of these negative attributes actually help build sainthood or Christian character. If you don't like the term saints, the godly Christian character. It's how we soul build.
I was gonna say sainthood theodicy is a pretty way of saying that. Right?
yeah. It's like God fine-tuned the world to create saints. Saint fostering.
Yeah. And I do want to highlight, I think these questions are really valuable. I think even the objections that are coming in are very valuable because I think they help elucidate kind of where we're coming from.
Yes.
And they help us find places that we didn't translate very well, what's going on in our minds or anything like that. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
and so I'm with you. I kind of have that Rasmussian view that I love, being charitable to those I disagree with, and seeing the value of where someone's coming from, because I think that when we disagree, it can help shine the light of reason onto our argument, such that we may need to abandon it, or it can help polish off like arbitrary uselessness, and polish our argument too. And so
Well, I definitely
I
think
think
it's
the
good.
objections are
I
very
definitely think
valuable.
it's good. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Travis, I definitely think it's good, and that's
Yeah,
why I asked the questions I did. At this point, you're talking about a view that requires almost God to reveal Himself, like Dan was saying, in a general sort of way, and
right.
from
And
there,
so
I think that we have to expect a incarnation, like you said.
right,
So
and I would just say something positive, like the value of where I see Ethan coming from is that we want to keep this in our forethought that, hey, we're talking about the Judeo-Christian faith that revelate that God reveals Himself in Christ, and so we don't want to lose sight of that. So I think
Right
it's
on.
very valuable to keep that in mind.
Yeah,
So,
so when I actually this presentation we give was just on theism. When I give my full-fledged argument and I have like a long time to talk,
Yeah.
I say a long time to talk because in that I'm talking about Old Testament reliability, New Testament reliability, authorship, like everything, right? My hypothesis, my starting hypothesis is Christian theism.
right.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
and you
not
know what?
just
That's
theism.
interesting. That's interesting you say that, because like a lot of evidentialists don't start there, and I'm a classicalist. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a classical theist,
Mhm.
but
Hmm.
I'm a cumulative case classical theist. So I
I'm
believe that I can start where I see that the person I'm engaging and building a relationship to will
Yeah.
need me to start. And I
I'm
think that's
yeah.
important too, because I'm not gonna some guy that believes in God, I'm not gonna just start with general
Right.
revelation. I'm
Right.
gonna start
Yeah.
with Jesus, right? So
Sure. It
I see your
depends. Yeah.
point. So that's why I always say
So
I'm cumulative case.
I also want to say that I just do this out of my love for evangelism.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So here's the thing: if all I need to do to bring someone to Christ is share the gospel with them, I'm not going to talk about all this.
Yeah,
Like,
of course,
what's the
of
point?
course.
So,
Yeah, of course.
Right.
this is like I do this for the people that are really
Absolutely.
struggling, that just have sincere intellectual blocks.
And
Absolutely.
I mainly do it because I find it fascinating
Fair
studying the
Yeah, I do
foundation.
too. Yeah, it's all
But
fascinating. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, like
But
when
thanks, guys. I mean, this is great. This has
yeah,
been really great.
I'm sort of an Oppian where I look at general theories, but I'm also part of a Swinburnian where I look at the cumulative case, and I start with you said you're a classical. I would call myself a classical apologist, but I think it automatically entails Christian theism. So my
Of course.
starting hypothesis is Christian theism.
Of course, and well, I mean, if I'm going to say I'm an apologist at all, as far as having a show that's on Christianity,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
obviously.
So, like, yeah, that's why
Yeah,
I defended the cumulative case position in that discussion we did
I
a
saw
long
that.
time
That was
ago.
good.
Remember,
Yeah.
and the reason I defended that is because it's not that I'm saying I'm not classical. It's not saying that I'm not cumulative. It's saying that I always try to go in the realm of relationship, where I start where that person is, and just like you guys have confirmed that too. So I mean, I don't try to get lost on the semantics either. So but yeah, guys,
Yeah.
I mean, this has been fabulous. I loved how you broke down this ontology of the foundations of reality. To me, I mean, you're putting words to things that are just natural to us that we take for
Yeah.
granted, and I really love that. And that's why it just fascinates me to say, hey, look, how do we how do we connect this? How do
Yeah, I'm
we
I'm
have to
so
connect
glad
it.
you
Yeah.
picked up on that because that's one of
Yeah.
the things I love to do. I just love to point to the powers that you guys have to see the same thing I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Can I say one
Right.
thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's Karl Barth. It's his name is spelled Barth, but it's like pronounced Bart. Karl Barth. Ethan wanted to make sure that was clarified.
All right, we
he's
clarified it, brother. All right, well, guys, again, thanks for coming on. We'll have to follow up on all this and keep the conversation
we didn't get to
going.
finish, but I thought we had a good start. Yeah,
and you know, unfortunately, it's what we do with everybody that has time limits. I mean, we're fathers. Well, some of us are fathers, and some of us are studying for our masters and need to get to school, and we need to do other things. But this was great, guys. I loved it, man. So I really thank you guys for being on tonight. And again, I can't say it like Tyler, but until next time, guys, good night. Be safe and stay like Christ. Oh, I stole it.
Yeah. Take care. Blessings in Christ.